Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's presentation. My name is Brent Davis, and I will be your host for tonight's session. Just to take you through a bit of housekeeping before we introduce tonight's presenters. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a red arrow, which you can click on, which will open and close your control panel. You're signed in by default tonight using your computer audio system. If you are having audio issues, please click on the use telephone button and you'll see a phone number and a PIN pop up, and you can use those to call in and hear the audio through your telephone. We want lots of questions tonight, so please type those into the questions pane as we go through, and we'll answer those either as we go through tonight's presentation or at the end of the session, depending where appropriate. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce tonight's presenter. So we're fortunate enough tonight to have two presenters today. So we've got Gary Nicol, who is a golf professional born in Scotland, has travelled the world coaching golfers of all standards, all the way from weekend golfers through to tour players, and all sorts of had all sorts of success doing that role. He's now based at Archerfield Links on Scotland's Gulf Coast. And we also have Karl Morris here as well, who's a performance coach. Has been in that field for over 30 years, has worked with multiple major winners in golf, Ashes cricket captains, which we won't talk too much about. We'll get rid of with that pretty quickly. And he's also the founder of the Mind Factor Institute. So we're very fortunate enough to have these guys on the call today. So I'm going to take them off mute and hand over control to them so they can share their webcam. Just with that, guys, the presentation today is going to be mostly on camera. So make sure you make your camera window as large as possible so you can see the camera nice and clearly. Thanks, guys. It's all yours.
Thanks, Brent. Thank you. Thanks for the invite, Brent. And just mentioning there straight away, if anybody's watching, it's good to see some guys. I came over to Australia. I was invited by the PGA in 2006. I did a bunch of seminars. So if anybody was at those seminars, it's good to see you again. And that actually was the year after that England had won the Ashes. We got them back after 18 years. So it was a good time to come over to Australia. So hope you're all watching the World Cup.
I'm a Scotsman. I'm on your side, guys. Not interested in English cricket.
Gary doesn't understand cricket. We're not here to talk about cricket, obviously. The reason for being here is to talk about putting, and more specifically what we consider the lost art of putting. And we've written a book that's getting some nice press and some nice reviews on Amazon. And the book pretty much came about as a result of a conversation that Gary and myself had a few years ago. We'd started to do a bunch of putting clinics, and we had a bit of a different approach of how we went about it.
Yeah, I think what we discovered was that we had an incredible amount of success very quickly with it, and the whole kind of concept behind it was born out of frustration of having worked with numerous golfers who had kind of gone down the rabbit hole trying to perfect their technique, if you like, and got so tied up in it, so tied in knots in it, that it just kind of, it wouldn't allow them to perform when it mattered, because they became too technical, too tense, too tied up. And the stuff that we started to work on with a number of different golfers at different levels, just kind of, I think that the word we hear more than any is liberated them. It just freed them up to actually think about creating putts rather than trying to perfect their putting stroke. And the whole kind of concept of the book came about on the basis of that. We kind of identified what we had kind of termed as the 6 putting performance principles, which may be slightly different to those you would normally associate with putting. And on the back of the success we had with various putting schools and master classes, whatever, we decided that there was actually a book in there. So we sat down, a couple of years ago to start the book. And we launched it almost a year ago today. Wasn't it? Scottish Open last year. So the book's been on sale for just about 12 months. And yeah, we've been getting loads of incredibly positive feedback from it, which is very encouraging. And yeah, we've had a bit of success with quite a few players, and they seem to enjoy what we're talking about. They love the fact it's not too technical. They love the fact that we're not telling them what to do. We're kind of asking them questions to allow them to take ownership of what they're learning, and then apply that learning to playing golf and, yeah, creating putts and having a bit of fun on the golf course.
I think one key point that we've been making at the outset, we're not saying for 1 minute here not to work on technique. We're not saying that that is a wrong approach. We're just potentially just giving you, so it doesn't have to be either or, we're just giving you some ideas that maybe would unleash a person's creativity on the greens, because, you know, Gary and myself grew up in the era, you know, my hero was Ballesteros, and I remember hearing that Sevi talked about the fact that when every putt that he hit in his life, he felt there was a certain shape to it. He felt he was hooking the putts into the hole or putting the putts into the hole. Now, the science would say that didn't really happen.
But in his mind, it did.
But in his mind, and, you know, for many of you who are past 21, you'll remember that famous putt that he holed at St Andrews in 1984, and the way that the ball just crept in on the top side of the hole there, and the famous punching of the air. And that'll tie in with what we believe is probably the most obvious thing that many people should be working on with putting, but they just don't.
Yeah.
But let's jump in, because I'm conscious of the time that we've got, and hopefully we can take a bunch of questions at the end. And hopefully if you can just get 1 or 2 ideas that you might find useful for your own coaching. We're not saying that this is the way to do it, but these are kind of 6 principles that we've found are very beneficial.
Yeah, and I think by applying the principles, you can help find your way. So it's not, we're not saying this is our way, this is the way, but it's a way. And if you apply some or all of the principles, you can help perhaps find your way, or your students' way, to help them putt better, basically, hole more putts, not a bit of fun.
The first one, so the 6 principles, the first one is what we call your story. And over again, found with most people with putting is that it's so easy to just jump straight in at the stroke, and it's coming too much from the inside, or you're cutting across it or whatever. Fine, but what we know now, based on the work by a chap called Timothy Wilson, probably the most influential book I've ever read, and I'd recommend for everybody that they look at it, is a book called Redirect by Timothy Wilson, Harvard professor in the States. And his basic premise is that as human beings, we're all just a bunch of stories. And the idea being that the stories that we tell ourselves over and over again actually become our reality. And there's no better example of that in golf. You know, we all know those players who almost can't wait to tell you how well they've hit it on the golf course, and how many greens and how far they're hitting it, but how badly they've put it. Yeah. And there's a great story, but one I always latch back to is the Harvey Pennick tale. About Harvey Pennick, as you know, wrote the Little Red Book, a wonderful instructor. Well, it was a psychology book, basically. It was, yeah. And his 2 most famous pupils were Ben Crenshaw and Tom Kite. And apparently, the night before they both went on tour for the first.
He coached them both as college players, haven't they?
Yeah, as junior players. And again, it was interesting for me with that, very different looking golf swings, very different approaches. But Pennick was wise enough to allow them to develop. Anyway, so they're having a dinner before they go out on the PGA Tour at the same time. And apparently, I think it was Tom Kite who said to Harvey Pennick, "Mr. Pennick, if there was one single piece of advice that you would give us, what would it be?" And apparently he looked at them both and he said, "Make sure that you go to dinner with good putters." And what sounds a very trite comment actually has a lot of wisdom in there, has genius within it, because misery loves company. And the key thing to understand for us now, as we've seen this, is if you don't change your story, if you don't change the narratives that you carry around with you,
you're just going to keep living out the same story.
Whether it be putting or the rest of the game or whatever. Because in the brain, there is something very important, a concept called the thinker and the prover. And basically, so you've got thinker and prover. If you can see that. And the way it works is what the thinker thinks, the prover aims to prove. So if the story that I carry around with me is that I'm a useless putter,
and you keep 3 putting,
my prover's constantly searching for evidence to actually back that up.
Yeah, to support that and to actually turn around to you and say, see, told you so.
Yeah.
Told you we're going to 3 putt half a dozen times today, because you always do.
So every bit of evidence that I can get to back up the story of being useless on the greens is latched onto by the prover in the brain. And it's a useful and simple model for coaching to introduce this to people, because as Timothy Wilson said, we're not aware of the stories, we just carry around with them, and we think that is actually reality.
Yeah. I had a guy the other day who said, he just said, I can 2-putt from anywhere, whether it's 2 feet, 102 feet, I'll 2-putt it. And I tried to explain to him that as long as he continues to think that way, he's kind of set the bar. That's all he's ever going to achieve at best. You know, if he thinks he's going to 2-putt every green, he probably won't 3-putt a whole lot of times, but he's definitely not going to single-putt many greens either. So he's put the parameters in place that he just cannot go beyond.
And I think a useful tool in your own coaching with this is when you sit down with anybody, be that for putting or whatever part of the game, is just to ask them that simple question: what's your story? What is your story? And let them tell you, let them emote the way that they construct the world and the way that they see themselves.
Absolutely, because if you don't, all you're going to do is basically form an opinion based on assumptions. If you don't really know what, you know, if we observe effects, that's fine. But the real trick is to figure out why something's happening, not just observe that it is happening. Yeah. Now, if a guy starts doing whatever with his putter or his putts, there's probably a reason for that. So unless you dig deep enough to find out what the root cause of that is, all you're really going to be doing is put a stick in plaster on an open wound that's just going to keep falling off time after time.
Yeah. As another colleague of ours said, in terms of the golf swing, you don't change golf swings by trying to change golf swings. You change golf swings by changing concepts.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of you will relate to that. So the whole thing with the story is a beginning point. You can't just change the story by telling somebody, change your story, close your eyes and chant to yourself that you're wonderful. You know, many people have tried that and it's not particularly effective. No. But what you can do to change the story is make somebody very, very aware of what we both believe, I think I'm correct in saying this, Gary, is the fundamental key to better coaching, really.
Yes.
It's a bit that's really overlooked, it's misunderstood.
Yeah.
Again, we jump straight in at effect. But principle number 2 in the book, which, you know, Gary, you've been kind enough to say that when we sort of first worked on this, it had a big influence.
Totally changed my thinking, flipped on its head, basically. Completely.
So that is attention.
Yeah.
You know, the idea being that whenever you're trying to do anything well, you will have your attention in one of 2 places. It will either be on something that's useful to that task,
or the opposite end of the spectrum, which is useless.
And you know, we tend to debate endlessly about the minutiae of positions and things like that, which we're not saying doesn't matter, but when you understand the effects of attention, of what can happen when a person puts their attention in a certain place, we've found it over and over again.
It's incredibly powerful. Now, this is not a new concept. You know, the people who do martial arts for hundreds of years have had a single point of focused attention, and it's worked wonders for them. It's almost like a miniature form of meditation, isn't it? It really is. Well, it is meditation. Yeah, in its simplest form, having your attention in one place at any given moment in time.
And we like to say to people, both players and coaches, that to get good at this, you need to become what we call an attention detective, that you need to become very aware of you as a unique individual. Where does your attention need to be to actually get the job done?
Yeah, where does your attention serve you best?
Yeah. And we'll go into a few ideas of that, but it's just, I think for the whole world of coaching, it's a very, very interesting area to begin to explore and look at. But you know, the individual is king. That it's kind of like a sequence. It's trying to unlock a safe. That you've got to put a sequence together, and it's very, very challenging as a coach if you always impose the way you use your attention onto somebody else. So one of the drills that we do that kind of started the journey really, and it was a drill that we learned from. I learned from Fred Shoemaker many years ago. For those who've not heard of Fred, take a look at his work. He wrote a wonderful book called Extraordinary Golf, and he wrote a putting book. But I did the school out in California, a number of years ago. And one of the things that Fred will get you to do straight away is what's known as the after image. So basically, when you hit a putt, if you aim to see when the ball has left its position.
Yeah, if you can imagine using your eyes like a laser if you focus on a dimple on top of the golf ball, and imagine your eyes are like a laser looking right through that. When you hit a putt, if you keep your eyes where they are, you will see something appear where the ball was, which is basically a kind of dark circle where the ball was, and it's called a retinal after image. It's like if you look at if you look at a light bulb and close your eyes, you can still see the light bulb. Now, we've done this with hundreds, if not thousands of golfers, and we always ask them, how many putts do you think you've hit in your life? And the standard answer is too many, isn't it, really? And we ask them if they've ever seen that before, and they say, well, no, but it's been there in every putt they've ever hit, which would suggest that their attention has been elsewhere. Now, when we observe good putters, we all see that they've all got their heads still, the head's really quiet, it's not moving around. That's the observation. But I think you and I both know we can keep our heads still over the ball, but we can have all sorts of nonsense flying around inside it. But when you're focusing on that single point of attention, that dimple or the after image when the ball's gone, you cannot be thinking about anything or everything else.
What's really interesting relating to attention is when we do the after image as a starting point. People tell us all the millions of things that they're thinking about: rock the shoulders, keep the wrist still, all that kind of stuff, and nice and smooth. It's okay, that's fine. Just park that. Because think about that in terms of attention, how disparate it is, jumping around all of the time. And just then simple. The best way to explain the after image, it's almost like if you look at a light bulb, close your eyes, and you can still see the effect there. And when you get somebody to look for the after image, their sole attention is on something that's happening here and now. And even the intention to see the after image has
even if you don't see it straight away, the fact you're looking for it keeps your attention at that one spot for the amount of time necessary to have a good putt, basically.
But what we always observe, what me and Gary always see in the putting clinics, is we get people observing the after image, and immediately we start to hear better putting.
Yeah. We can't feel it. We can't perhaps get the feedback, the sensory feedback, but we get the audio feedback. We've all heard what a good putt sounds like and what a crappy putt sounds like. There's a distinct difference, isn't there? So all of a sudden, what it essentially does is frees up people's motor skills to actually perform a task. So we're great believers in the task creating the technique rather than the other way around. So, we've all been kind of led to believe that if you make a good stroke, we'll hit a good putt. So the stroke creates a putt. We beg to differ. We would think about flipping that 180 degrees round, and we believe that the putt actually creates the stroke. The task creates the technique.
Yeah. When the mind is just observing the after image and it's absorbed in that particular task, it's amazing how virtually everybody that we see, different motor skills turn up, different movement turns up, not as a result of focusing on that, but as a result of...
And the strokes actually tend to get better, the technique gets better, without trying to get better. It's just the byproduct.
So that the idea that the body organises itself around the task, to me, is one of the central tenets of what we're about. Is that it's kind of like we don't give the body enough credit for the wisdom that it's got, but the brain, we need to understand how that works. So that second point, the whole area of attention, to become more sort of focused on that in your coaching and get your players to actually tell you what they've got their attention on through a pre-shot, through the actual stroke itself, and also when how they react as well. So just building up a picture of the sequence of what their attention is on, and our view is that if you've had your attention on perfecting your stroke for 10 years and you've got worse as a putter, probably the 11th year isn't going to cut it.
It's probably not going to be your eyes.
It's not going to be. No. Again, we're not saying don't work on technique, but as we'll explain as we go deeper into it, just for many players, when they understand this concept of attention, it really just does liberate the whole thing.
Totally. I think one of the things that we've found is by using TrackMan performance putting software, which is basically tracking what the ball does, we can actually suggest that a player puts their attention on, because most coaching to date has been all about, certainly putting coaching, what you need to do, what the putter needs to do. But the thing that's sadly neglected is the golf ball. But ultimately, we've got to get the golf ball into the ball, haven't we? Not ourselves, not the putter. So what we can do is we can use the TrackMan to measure how the ball performs, what the ball does when your attention is on your putter, for example, on your stroke, for example, or when your attention is actually on the ball. And just having your attention on the ball, just a simple change in concept, the results are remarkable, aren't they? It's just incredible how, if you think about any other sport, if you watch Aussie rules football, you watch rugby, you watch cricket, tennis, whatever, when we're watching that, what are we watching? We're watching the ball. What you're paying attention to when you're playing these sports is the ball, but then we got to play golf.
We pay almost no attention.
We pay virtually no attention to golf. It's all about what we need to do, what the arms need to do, what the hips need to do, what the golf ball needs to do. We forget about the golf ball, which is madness.
Which leads very nicely, Gary, well sort of fitted in there.
It's almost like we've done this before.
Yeah, believe me, this is not been rehearsed. You probably do believe it. Very nicely to the third one. Many years ago, I was in a seminar, and I heard a very famous speaker say that the quality of your life will be determined by the quality of your questions. And I really didn't understand how important that was at that point, but I do now. Because if I was to say to everybody now, listening to this, tuning into this, watching this, what can you hear in the background? And just pause for a moment, you'll have momentarily, your attention will have been shifted to something else other than this broadcast.
You could hear something you couldn't hear 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, because for me, the really exciting thing is, it's unbelievably simple but effective, is that the questions focus your attention. Now, if questions focus your attention, and we want our attention in the right place to get the job done at golf, it then becomes a bit simpler, because we believe that you can start to understand. If you ask just some really good, simple questions, you know that that's going to control your attention, because it's like the brain's a question answering machine. And if I said to all of you now, what does your car look like? Boom, an image probably pops up in your brain of that very thing.
Yeah. So same things like, what's your next door neighbour's dog look like? So you get an image. Not only that, you can probably
that's assuming you've got a next door neighbour and a dog.
You can probably hear it bark as well.
Yeah. And with putting, it may seem ludicrous to sort of bring it down to things as simple as this, but we believe there's a couple of questions that can make such a difference. Because we don't essentially believe in positive thinking as such, because positive thinking tends to be where you're making statements. I'm going to put well today, I'm going to hold it, I'm going to hold it, I'm going to hold it.
Yeah, you can use that as a mantra all day long, but if you don't actually believe in it, you're kidding yourself. You don't buy into it.
I'm going to hold it, I'm going to hold it, I'm going to hold it, I'm going to hold it. Oh, God, I didn't.
Mistake.
Where do I go now?
Yeah.
But there's a big difference between positive thinking, which tends to be statements projecting into a future that you don't know, to positive questions.
Yeah, which keep you grounded, keep you in the here and now.
Now, one of the questions that we've had many players work on is the idea that every single putt that you have is a unique opportunity. It's a unique moment in time to create a putt. So when a player walks onto a green, no matter what's happened in the past, no matter what's going to happen in the future, if they were to ask the simple question, is it possible for me to hold this putt?
The answer, until someone builds a wall or a bunker in between you and the ball, you and the hole, sorry, then the answer's got to be yes. Has to be yes. It's always possible. It might not be highly probable, but it's definitely possible.
It's, again, such a big influence on me and Gary. Fred Shoemaker said, the bravest thing a golfer can ever do is stay open to possible. Yeah. You've missed everything all day. You're on the 12th hole. It doesn't feel like your stroke's working today, but is it possible that you could hold this putt?
We've all held one we thought was missed, right? You all go, God, left that short, or missed that left, or pulled that, whatever. Then something happens, the ball just falls in the side door. So it is possible. It doesn't even have to be a perfect putt. I mean, what is a perfect putt? Good question, isn't it? I don't think one that goes in the hole, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
No. Is it possible that you could hold this putt? Yeah. Which then opens up for the second question, which we've had some really interesting results with this. Is if you get a player to ask the question, they've got a 10-footer, 15-footer, 20-footer, or whatever. If you get them to ask the question, what does this ball need to do to go in the hole? And you stand back, just let them answer that question.
Yeah.
And I know, Gary, you see it over and over again in your coaching, that when you ask that question, what does this ball need to do to go in the hole? There's generally a rich description, isn't there? Of
very accurate, very clear, very vivid, very lucid description of exactly what the ball needs to do. You know, it needs to travel on the correct line at the appropriate pace. At no point has anyone ever answered that question with, well, if I rock my shoulders, I keep the putter nice and square, and I keep it low to the ground, and I keep my head still. Because that's not the question we're asking. The question is, what does the ball need to do, not what you need to do. So by asking that really powerful but very simple question, what does the ball need to do, it gets your attention on just that, what the ball needs to do. Which again, kind of leads on to...
Well, I think, just to kind of finalise that we believe, well, not believe, science is telling us this, that your body will organise movement around clear intention.
Yeah.
It's you know, there's a few billion years of evolution gone on with this. You know, when we had a clear intention, when we came out of the caves and we needed to secure some lunch, and the wildebeest, wildebeest was passing by over there, and we had a spear. We had an intention to secure that prey. Movement was organised around that clarity of intention. Now, I'm not sure that they had spear coaches in those days.
No, they're pretty thinly ground.
Probably video was a while away. And you know, the movement is organised around clarity of intent. I think that's such an important concept. Now, does that movement always result in textbook action or things that we like the look of?
It may not.
No, it doesn't.
No guarantee that it will or it won't.
I mean, I grew up, you mentioned Sevi, and the greatest putters I ever saw was a Japanese golfer called Isao Aoki. And Isao Aoki brought every single toes up in the air, he just picked it up and chopped across it. But my word, he could putt, one of the best ever. Now, I would pretty much guarantee that Aoki had very clear intention what he was trying to do with the golf ball.
His attention would be on the ball, it wouldn't be on his stroke. It wasn't until we started analysing things that we started to pay too much attention to what the person and the putter were doing. Before, we just observed the golf ball.
And again, as coaches, I think it's just worth playing around with these ideas. And you know, there's TrackMan technology available now. Just measure what happens when the attention shifts. And when you ask the question, what does this ball need to do to go in the hole? What are the images that are formed? We'll come on to that shortly. But it really then puts, a lot of this, what we find, is that it takes the onus away from us as coaches having all the answers and shifts it more to the student. And we sort of
rather than us giving them our answer, by asking questions, they provide their own answer, so they can personalise exactly what's going on because we're asking the question, they provide the answer, we don't provide the answer. We provide the question. We believe that the better the question, if you keep asking good questions, you'll come up with much better answers.
You know, just forget putting from the whole game, I think the concept of questions, certainly when you're working with better players, you know, people get very lost in the idea of pre-shot routines and all this kind of stuff, and all things have got to be in perfect sequences, which I think is a nonsense. But actually, when you get them to understand the power of questions, because when
they form what happens, they form your response. If you don't ask a question, you're going to, you know, everybody wants to be more consistent, the C word as we refer to it. But in order to become more consistent, they're trying to achieve that through constant change, which is absolute madness. How can that be at all possible? But if your process begins with asking good questions, then that sets off that sequence of events and leads to the brain and body organising the movement required to perform whatever task that may be.
I think another myth is that good players are just sailing along in this sea of calmness, and we all know that that's not the case. But one of the things that we do know is in any situation, chaos can be reigning, you can be feeling very uncomfortable, but actually you can still keep asking good questions, and that question will bring you back.
It keeps bringing you back. It stops you
to this task.
Getting too far ahead, it stops you delving too far into the past. You know, you may have be putted for the first 6 greens, but that's got no bearing on what should happen on the 7th. As long as you understand that this is a unique putt and a unique moment in time, you've never had it before, you'll never have it again. So if you start asking good questions, your attention will be brought very much back to the here and now. It'll stop you going forward, it'll stop you going into reverse. It's very, very powerful. I mean, I've been working with Karl for a number of years now, and I have to say, since I started to really, truly understand the power of questions and how they do direct your attention, my coaching has changed. And I would say for the better, without question. And the results have done as well with the players I work with. So.
And we find over and over again, it just becomes more interesting and more
fun.
The idea that we love the concept of standing there in the same place, repeating the stroke over and over again, with the idea that the brain would somehow just code all that movement and we bring it with us the next day. And we know that that's not the way the brain works. The human brain is designed for flexibility, not consistency. Again, it relates right back to the days when we were roaming around in the cave. I mean, how many times have any of us, we've felt a certain thing, we've got it today, how many times does that come with you tomorrow? It just doesn't, it doesn't work. Rather than consistency, what we're looking for is adaptability. And the idea that actually on any given day, you can ask that question, what does this ball need to do to go in the hole? And begin to trust the system that it can get the job done. Then you become a creator of unique putts. And one of our big things with practice, mirror work's fine and drills and all the rest of it. But if you think about it, to become a good putter, fundamentally, you have to be able to predict a putt based on one attempt.
So every day we ask people how many balls you take to the putting green. If you do work in your putting, how many balls do you take? 3. Why? They come in sleeves of 3. I don't know. Yeah, they come in 3s. Right. So first things first, if you know you've got a first, a second, and a third attempt, how much attention are you actually going to pay at the first one? Not an awful lot. The first one's a bit of a rangefinder. That misses. Second one, you learn a little bit from the first one. It's not until you miss 2 in a row you think, oh God, actually, I better pay attention to this one. We do not have that luxury on the golf course. We don't have a second serve, we don't have a third serve. You've got to get it right first time, or at least give yourself a chance of getting it right first time. So as Karl said, part of the skill of putting, or the art of putting, is to learn that skill of prediction. Now, you're not, if you've missed the hole with the first one, or even if it's got in with the first one, you're not going to predict what's going to happen the second one. You've learned from the first one, from the outcome of the first one. Again, you don't have that luxury in the golf course. So we would strongly recommend, and this has been a game changer for a lot of people, if you got the putting green to work in your putting, take what you're allowed to take on the golf course, a ball and a putter, because that's all you're going to have once you're out there. So, golf's one of these crazy games where we don't actually train as we play, or where we play. Footballers train on a football pitch, rugby players train on a rugby pitch, golfers train on a driving range. Yeah, very different environment. So that's why we can't transfer range game to golf course.
I don't know if we're preaching to converting, and I'm sure many of you get your players to practice in this way. But I think for me, the overriding thing with 2, 3, 4 ball practice, standing in the same place, is that you miss out the questions bit, because if you stand in the same place.
Sorry guys, I'm looking up to, just give me a second, it's a fire alarm.
An extra bit of excitement for tonight, always good.
Look at the building's on fire. There we go. Got your attention though. Thanks, Gary. As we were saying, if you're on the green and you're in the same place over and over again, the first part of the putt is missed out. You don't ask the questions, you don't engage your imagination. So we're a big believer in, with 1 ball practice. I love a game where I call it 9 greens in regulation. You just get players to have 9 different putts from 9 different places, assuming that they've hit 9 greens in regulation, and see what you can score. But the key thing with that is that they actually ask the questions on every putt. It can seem laborious, but you're doing everything that you would do when you get out on a golf course. So that when you get on the golf course, your brain doesn't freak out and say, "Oh, this is different. I've now not got 4 goals. I'm not." and over again, we just find that people begin to organise movement better as a result of the quality of the images and the quality of the questions.
Yeah, and I think that, sorry about that, I hope no one went deaf there with the fire alarm. Just pressed a few buttons, hopefully that's it fixed for the time being. Don't see any flames or anything.
If you knew that if the roof caved in, you know it wasn't fire.
I'll take full responsibility for that. Yeah, and Karl mentioned there, when you ask these questions, is it possible the ball can go in the hole? Yes. What does the ball need to do? Another fantastic question would be, what does a good putt look like? So if we don't know what a good putt looks like, how on earth are we going to create that good putt? So it's again, by asking that question, what does it look like, an image starts to form. And then what that does, the research that we've done, which has been quite in-depth, suggests on visualization, the power of imagery, is that creates a neural pathway. So, I mean, we watch golf on TV, you see the shot tracker, you see the putt predictor. Now, wouldn't it be great if we could see that before any shot or putt we hit? Because it just basically provides you with a pathway to go down. So, we talk to some of the people we work with, once we get them to fully understand that by asking these really good questions, the powerful imagery they start to produce in their mind's eye virtually creates a pathway for them to go down, and all of a sudden they know they then have a very clear intention again for that putt or for that shot, which again is just so powerful, and it takes your attention away from trying to go down falling down the trap or the rabbit hole of trying to go down the pursuit of perfection, if you like, rather than actual creativity. And I think the feedback we get on a daily basis is people love being freed up to just become creative on the greens or on the golf course in general, but especially on the greens. If you can start thinking about creating putts rather than creating strokes, and encourage your students to do the same, it's amazing how many smiles, a lot more smiles you start to see. I've certainly experienced that, witnessed that in the last 3 or 4 years. It's been quite eye-opening, to say the least.
Which then leads on to probably the reason we wrote the book in the first place was we came across a graphic, an image, and I believe it was some German researchers that put this together. And as every single person here watching this, listening to it would know, there's only 2 things that you need to get right to hold the
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to get the line, you've got to get the pace.
Got to get the line and pace. Now, generally, when we do seminars across the country, etc., we'll ask the audience, once you get outside 6 or 8 feet, which is more important, line or pace? And almost everybody says, well, pace is more important, which we agree with. But then we say, well, what do you spend all of your time working on? And if we look again at the putting industry, go into Amazon, putting gadgets on your putters,
training aids, alignment aids,
virtually everything is geared towards line. Yeah. Now again, we're not for 1 minute saying line isn't important. Obviously, it's a big part of the equation. But as we'll show you in a second, perhaps we don't give enough importance to pace, because the thing is, to hold a putt, again, it seems such an obvious thing to say, but to hold a putt, your golf ball has to have a relationship to gravity. Now, the one thing that can overcome gravity on the greens is momentum. So what you have is what's known as the effective hole size, where not literally, but the hole, as you know, actually shrinks in size dependent on the pace of the putt. But we really didn't realise how much that was. And
we'll show you this.
Gary showed you the graphic.
Hopefully you can see that. I mean, we'll quite happily share this with you later or send it on or whatever. But basically, the size of the hole changes according to pace. So at dead weight, which is the middle of the hole, not the front of the hole, but kind of halfway in, which is 2 1/8 of an inch in from the front edge, the middle of the hole is 4 1/4 inches wide. If the ball's enough to pace to travel just 6 inches past the hole, effectively you lose just over 10% of that hole width. So it's now down to about 3.8 inches. If you get it slightly off center, you're maybe going to get, well, a little bit off center, you're going to get a bit of a lip out. Don't know if you can all see that, hopefully you can. Now, if the putt has enough pace to carry it a foot past, we're now going to lose almost 40% of the effective hole size. So now the hole width's only 2.6 inches wide. If we now go to 2 feet past, we've lost more than half the effective hole size. So we've got 1.9 inches width. Well, that's just 2 feet past. Now, if we go 3 feet past, we've lost 2/3 and more of the effective hole size. So the hole width is 1.4 inches. So that little strip of hole that you see in the middle there, that's almost going to become like a bridge. So momentum is going to continue, let the ball continue rolling on by. So we've all heard the phrase "never up, never in," but unless you hit right in the back center of that hole and the ball jumps up about a foot in the air and comes back down again, the ball's just going to motor on by. If you think about it, pace gives you options on line, but line limits you to perfect pace essentially. So if you think about it, we're trying to get as big and effective target or hole size as we possibly can. So obviously the better your pace gets, the bigger the target size.
I mean, one great image that we have used with players who are obsessed with line is that if you can imagine that you've got these 3 golf balls here, and these 3 golf balls are actually tracking towards the hole at just the right pace, with maybe a little bit of break this way or this way. You know, how many of those golf balls have a chance to go in at the right pace? Well, all 3 of them. If you get your pace slightly out, you've actually only got an option with one of them. So the real game changer for us was that actually, if we got better at pace, we can be a little bit out on line, and you'll still hold a bunch of putts. But certainly for the vast majority of golfers that we coach, medium, high handicap golfers, probably the #1 way that they could reduce the score significantly is to reduce the 3-putt.
Yeah.
And again, overwhelmingly, we've found over the last few years, most golfers are a lot better at line than they think, but an awful lot worse at pace than they think. In every round of golf we've ever played, somebody at some point will hit a putt that's on line with the hole that goes 5 feet past, and somebody in the 4-ball will say, "Good putt, you gave it a chance." Oh, no, you didn't.
Not really.
5 feet past, you gave it no chance whatsoever. But all of a sudden now you're bringing in the possibility of three putts.
Yes, but we kind of console ourselves with the fact that at least we got part of the equation right. At least it was just about on line. We just hit it a bit too hard. If you missed it 5 feet left to right, you'd be devastated. You'd be appalled with yourself. You would be very proud of yourself. But because you've knocked it 4 or 5 feet past, I gave that one a chance. Nah, you didn't. We're kidding ourselves on if we think that actually had any chance at all.
One massive question that I suggest that you consider asking your players, that we've had some really interesting answers and we use a flip chart for it, is to actually say to players, okay, the line, we all know the concept of the line, and say to them, okay, how big is the line? Now, for most people, as a visual in their mind, we know that the line is actually as big as the line that they've put on the golf ball, because we're almost institutionalized.
The Sharpie, the Sharpie, the Kobe one, whatever it is.
The brain's institutionalized to think that is the line. The line is that size. Now, Gary has a good analogy for this. That then actually you're trying to put your golf ball down a really thin tightrope, very, very thin tightrope. But actually, we've had some really interesting results with players when we actually explain the 3-ball concept. And now all of a sudden we say, okay, just imagine in your mind's eye if the actual line now was at 3 balls width, but certainly as wide as your putter,
or as wide as the hole.
As wide as the hole.
It's never any narrower the width of the hole if you get the pace right.
What would you feel more comfortable doing? Would you feel more comfortable trying to get the ball down a tightrope,
or a channel,
or would you feel like you can put it down a channel?
4 or 5 inch channel, absolutely.
We have a guy with both coaches who became at 57 an international golfer. With what was the break in his
39-year gap between caps?
39, it's maybe a record in international sport. And he good player, but he spent his life struggling with his putting. And now the liberation he says he feels. He said all I've got to do. He calls it a gutter, the kind of gutter that you have at the side of you on the roof of the house. He said all I've got to do is just send it down the gutter.
Yeah.
And again, the paradox takes place that when you're trying to be perfect with your stroke, that we can actually jam the system as a result of that.
Tension kicks in, fear kicks in, try not to get it wrong, don't miss it, don't do this, don't do that. But if we give you the freedom to putt down that channel, that 4 or 5 inch channel, all of a sudden, tension disappears. You can literally see the tension falling out of people's bodies and out of their fingers, out of their hands, out of their arms, out of their shoulders. It's just, and again, it frees them up and liberates them from the shackles of trying to do everything too perfectly, if you like.
Most pros will use alignment rods in their coaching, and generally with putting, alignment rods would be used at this end of things.
Yeah.
So you put your alignment rods on the floor and you're trying to keep the putter on a certain path. Okay, that's fine. We use them in a different way. We actually put the alignment rods either side of the hole on a reasonably straight foot and just say to people, do you think you could manage to keep the golf ball between those two lines, and all you've got to do is get the pace right?
Yeah. And so rather than using the start gauge, use finishing gauge basically. Rather than think about the start line, let's focus on the finishing line, because that's what really matters, where the ball finishes, not necessarily where it starts.
We were over in Ireland when we were writing the book, and we heard a story of one of the great Irish golfers of all time, a chap called Harry Bradshaw. And the chap I was speaking to said to me, have you ever heard of the Bradshaw drill? Which I hadn't, but apparently Harry Bradshaw did this drill every single day for 20 minutes or so. Apparently it was the only thing he did. Again, this is because it's all right talking about pace, but I think the more drills that you can give,
you've got to experience it.
Yeah. And very simply, the Bradshaw drill was he'd go onto the putting green with 2 balls. He'd send the first ball out to a random distance, and then the goal with the second ball was just to simply just kiss the second ball with the first ball,
knock it off its perch,
just literally knock it off its perch. And imagine doing that. Imagine if you got a tough drill. Imagine doing that. How good your pace would get.
Sounds really easy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No.
And
it's good fun though.
It's real good fun, and I really struggle to understand why would it make such a difference. Why would the drill be so effective? And you can only experience it by doing it. But my take on it now is when we practice normally, we practice to the hole, obviously. But the problem is, when we practice to the hole, back to attention, the only thing that we pay attention to, was it a good putt or a bad putt? Is it long? Is it short?
Yeah.
With the Bradshaw drill, what you actually do with the first ball that you send out, you really pay attention to the behaviour of the ball on the green, and because that's the only thing that you're getting feedback on. So your brain is on high alert with that first ball, and you're getting feedback of how you move and how the ball interacts with your putter. So again, we've had some really interesting results with players saying to them, just as a simple ritual before you play to get the pace of the greens for the day, just do the Bradshaw drill just for 5 minutes before you go out onto the golf course.
Yeah. I'm just checking my watch here. I'm aware we're kind of rambling on a little bit now. We did have, no, I'm as guilty as you, if not more so. We did plan to show you a couple of videos. However, rather than watch them now, when we're kind of pushing for time here, we'd actually like to invite some questions. If you want to at some point go to thelostartofgolf.com, you've got a number of little videos up there that kind of pay a lot of particular attention to the concepts that we cover in the book, especially things like pace, and the Bradshaw's balls drill is in there as well. So yeah, rather than kind of interrupt what we're doing here, because we'd obviously like to encourage some questions from you guys. If you want to go and look at these at a different time, there's a selection of videos there and a few little blog pieces and other bits and pieces on there as well. So I think, Brent, if you want to, we've still not covered entirely the full thing, but there's some sections on green reading and visualization. There's a couple of little videos on that as well, but I think it'd be much better, and I think it'd be appropriate at this moment in time to invite some questions from you guys to get your thoughts, if you like. How does that sound, Brent?
Yep, that sounds great. So if you can type your questions now into that questions box, they'll come through and we'll feed them through. So I've got a couple already come through to kick you off.
So where do I write?
No, that's fine. I will tell you what the questions are, so you can be nice and comfortable. So how do you deal with that player who just wants technique?
Yeah, with great difficulty, but I often use the sort of Einstein quote, which being the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. And what I then say to the player who is pretty much obsessed with technique, I'm saying, well, can we begin to consider that you might have a certain part of your practice time that you work on your technique, but can we explore the art of putting?
Yeah.
And the great thing then is if you introduce some of these concepts, for that technically minded person, you get them on the greens and work on some of these ideas. And with the help of TrackMan, for instance, you can actually then get some objective. You know, for a technical minded person, there's nothing better.
Who wants some technical data, or technical feedback? What you can actually show them is that, or show them, he, her, whatever, that by doing a certain exercise, when you're paying attention to the golf ball, what actually shows up is their path improves, their relationship of putter face management improves. What actually happens with the golf ball tends to improve. So yeah, that may be their initial intention, and you can just let them, if they're open-minded enough to even hit 3 or 4 putts, thinking about it slightly differently, then you can win them round very, very quickly. Because as Karl said, you can actually let them believe it is a kind of technical lesson by showing them some data, some improved data of how the putter face is being managed, or how the stroke, your tempo, whatever it is, based around, you know, asking them to perform a task and then seeing what happens when their attention is on the ball as opposed to their stroke, if you like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does for sure. So we've had a few more questions come through. I just need to scroll back up. So how you spoke before about the size of the hole changing based on the speed. So are you trying to get your students to hit each putt at a dead weight? So you got the entire hole?
On that one,
I think there's it depends a little bit on the quality of the greens. I mean, there is an argument that as the green quality decreases, that hitting dead weight putts, there might be a suggestion that with a little bit more pace,
any impurities are going to kind of show up there.
Exaggerate.
But all we're trying to do is show the fact that when you get the pace right, or when you get it dead weight, you've effectively got a bigger target to aim at. Now, most people then interpret that as, well, I don't really want to be aiming at a tiny little pinhead of a target because I've got very little chance of the ball going in. Now, as Karl said, any impurities on a green are going to be shown up if you're trying to hit it absolutely, drop in front edge. Some people like to see the ball going a little bit faster, some a little bit slower. It's such a very personal thing. We just allow them to take the information, understand the information, digest it, and then apply it in whatever way works best for them. It's all about what works best for them. We're not prescriptive.
It's just giving them options, really. Yeah. But back to that Sevi putt that I mentioned, for those of you who do remember that, if not, just have a look at it on YouTube. Sevi Ballesteros winning putt 1984. If you look at that putt, we could argue that putt that Sevi pulled to win the Open, that in the annals of the game, we could argue that he actually got his line quite wrong.
Yeah.
Because he was very much top side of the hole.
Fell in the back end.
But it just fell in. It fell in the back end. So I can't stress enough the change in mindset when you get people to really understand the concept of pace, and you give them the 3 golf ball image, that the hole has 3 golf balls that it can receive at the right pace. That for us has been the game changer. But literally, it was from seeing that.
It was a proper light bulb aha moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought.
We've both been coaching golf for thick end of 30 years. We came across that information that kind of, it blew our minds. It opened our eyes massively, and subsequently we've kind of passed on that knowledge and information, and no one doesn't like that concept, because as soon as you think you've got a bigger target, it just frees you up mentally and physically.
Sorry, Brent.
Sorry, that certainly makes sense. So the next question is, would you recommend any particular grip size to assist in pace control?
Again, very individual. It depends. Well, it's a very good question, because I think rather than just dive in and say, well, I think a person needs thick, thin, medium, long, short, whatever, ask the person how they're trying to control the putter. Now, if they're trying to take their hands out of it, or their wrists out of it. I don't suggest anyone take their hands out of it, because that's where the feel comes from. I don't know about you, Karl, but I've got very little feel in my shoulders. But if you want to take the wrists out of it, then you would probably suggest going for a slightly thicker grip. Tiger, for example, it would be the opposite. I mean, he still uses the old pink pistol grips on his putter, and he has done all his career, because he likes to feel what the putter head's doing through his hands. It might look like he's using his shoulders, but in actual fact, that feel doesn't come from his shoulders. That feel comes from his hands, and he feels that the closer his hands are to the shaft, the more feedback he's going to get. I don't mean closer as in down the grip, but so there's less rubber between his hands and the shaft. He gets much greater feedback. So again, it's very individual. Just
Test it.
test it. Yeah, do some testing. Again, get a TrackMan out and measure what the ball does when their attention's on whatever it is on, and try, do some exercise, do some exploration. It's great fun. It's amazing what you learn.
And a crazy question that, again, is an area to explore is, if you ask the players that you work with, if you were going to move the putter in a way that you enjoyed, as daft as that sound, again, it's amazing what shows up. What I can enjoy a movement. Well, yeah. What would you do if you actually? What would you do if you actually enjoyed the movement for its own sake? And you get sometimes you get somebody setting up way open or whatever, and maybe they automatically change the grip. But it's connected to this idea, and it's all based on ecological dynamic systems. All this idea that we're a complex system, and there's a lot of things going on. And the body's a lot cleverer than we give it credit for, and if you just give it the freedom to explore, and I'm not saying that's going to transform people, but suddenly if there was a different light switch going on in the brain, what would I enjoy? And actually then that becomes a more efficient movement. It's not us stamping what we think the thing should look like, because and I think it leads into that question that we're going to cover in the next book, that fundamental question. If the question is what's wrong with my swing, there's never an answer to it, because there's always something wrong. But if we ask the question, what's wrong with my shots? Now we can go somewhere different with that. We can work on too much shape or not enough.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
So again, to kind of relate that to putting, the question wouldn't be what's wrong with my stroke, but what's wrong with my putts. Because that's, if you're asking about what's wrong with strokes, you're just going to come up with a lot of opinions. But if you're asking what's wrong with my putts, then they're going to be long, short, left, right, whatever. They're facts. They are facts. We can deal with facts. And the journey from leaving it a little bit short right, if that's what your tendency is, the journey from a little bit short right into the middle of the hole is quite a short one. But the journey from a bad technique to a good technique, again, that's based on someone's opinion. And you're just going to go around in circles with that. But if you deal in facts and you figure out, when I putt well, this is what happens with my putts, rather than your stroke, or when I don't putt well, my putts do this. There will be tendencies, there will be patterns that start to show and start to form.
Now, just quickly tied into that question on grip size, it's popped up 2 or 3 times in the question. So putter hitting is obviously very important when it comes to getting the guys to putt better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I think it's like any fitting, whether it's a driver fitting, a wedge fitting, whatever. Basically, well, the thing I like most about it is we find a putter to fit that person's style, rather than trying to change your style to fit a putter. Basically, any good putter fitting historically would have been done, even in the last few years, would have been done almost entirely with a SAM Putt Lab, where you get great putter data, which is fantastic. I know they're bringing out some ball data, some ball data measuring device, but until they do, again, going back to the TrackMan thing, whether it's a putt or a full shot, we want to know how any shot, stroke, swing, whatever, is going to affect the golf ball. Now, unless we can measure what happens with the golf ball in the fitting, all you're going to do is find someone's tendencies to, I was elsewhere a few weeks ago and I went to someone getting a putter fitting, And yeah, while the stroke was kind of ticking all the boxes, if you like, with the fitted putter, this person, he didn't hold any putts, but he kept leaving them short and knocking them past. And then later on, asked the fitter, how he thought it went. He said, "Oh, it was great. I really got him geared, dialed in with his putter." Said, "But I didn't actually see him holding many putts. He wasn't really good at pace." He said, "Oh, we weren't really working on that," which I thought was a little odd, to say the least, because surely the purpose of getting a putter is to help you hold more putts, not just make better strokes. Does that make sense?
It does. It does completely. So, Scott's got an interesting comment. So you spoke about the story early on in the presentation, and he finds that most players already think they're good putters, and then when they aren't, and they don't tend to work on their putting, or they don't think they need to improve it. So how would you deal with someone who actually thinks they're a good putter but possibly isn't?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's a question.
The story can be a positive one,
yeah,
but actually a false story.
Yeah.
So the one thing I would say on that is, facts are king, aren't they? That if you can really get a player to look at, the conversion rates, what I like to divide putting into. I'll get each player to grade the putting capability on what I call it's 3 rough zones. Well, you've got the hole out range, which is 6 foot and in, what I call the opportunity range, which would be 6 foot to about 20 foot, and then the field range 20 foot plus. And I'll get a player to individually try and grade those areas. And usually there'll be, if somebody's not a good putter, there'll be some standouts in that. So for instance, if a player has very, very little conversion in that opportunity range, we can look at that and say, well, what could be possible if you just got a fraction better in that area? So you don't want to just jump in at the story if they believe they are a good putter, but it's framing it that what it's already good this, but what could get better? What could get better based on these statistics and these opportunities really?
I've never come across anyone in 30 years of doing this who says, "Do you know what? I'm holding too many putts. Could you help me kind of miss a few? Because I'm just every time I go out and play, I'm 18 putts. It doesn't happen, does it?" So even if they think they're a good putter and they believe they're a good putter, there's got to be room for improvement at some point, I would think.
But it's a good question.
Yeah,
really good question.
But I think they have to be honest with themselves before they can be honest with you. So if they've got data that suggests that they are having 23, 24 putts, listen, crack on, get in touch, tell us what you're doing, because we want to know as well.
At the higher levels, it's a great frame to look at. The number one of the higher predictors of how much somebody's going to earn is the stroke average.
Yeah.
And if you can look at it and say, well, okay, what can make half a shot difference, and then get really specific about if in those 3 putting areas, the hole out feel and opportunity, if we could just nudge one of those areas just fractionally, that could make half a shot difference to your stroke average. You're talking on the main tours of hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, a couple of shots a week, half a shot a day is 2 shots a week. If you take 2 shots off your 72 hole total every week, you're probably going to be doing a little bit better.
Now, we've had a question come through from Jason. You were talking about the speed aspect of putting, of getting the pace right, and he wants to know why do the best putters seem to hit so many short putts so firm, considering how much smaller the hole would be then?
I think they don't have the fear. Probably don't have the fear of missing the one coming back. So, yeah, confidence is a wonderful thing. Now, short putts, obviously, there's less chance of the face deviating too much on a 3 or 4 foot putt than would be in a 20 foot putt. So they're probably pretty confident. These guys practice a lot of these short putts. They've done them time and time again in the heat of the battle. So, if they believe they're going to hold them and they believe that hitting them hard is going to help them achieve that goal, then that'll work for them. But most of the people that we work with, we work with some good players, we work with some very good players, but we also work with lots of weekend golfers. We wouldn't necessarily recommend that they do that because, they're probably going to be facing the same length at least all the way back if they do get it slightly off. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the very good players that we worked in the past, some of them Some of them hit them a lot harder than others. Some like to die them in the front, some like to back them off the backboard, if you like. Again, it's a very, very personal thing. If it works for you, keep doing it.
I think once you certainly get outside that 6 foot range, I think the base element will be coming to it. So I think there's as Jason said, there's a personal element to how you hold the short ones. As Gareth said, it's worth definitely. Once you get outside that 6 foot range and you can create that three-ball image in somebody's mind, you know, again with better players, that opportunity range from 6 foot to 20 foot, what a difference that makes if just one or two of them are going in and around. The difference in momentum, but the freedom that emerges from that three-ball image is really quite interesting.
That makes lots of sense. So a question from Simon. So before a 6 foot putt, how many questions would you typically ask? Is it the same questions for every putt?
Yeah. I mean, in essence, we want to reduce the questions as much as possible, and you know, there's a number of players that we've worked with on this that they kind of almost get to a point with the story that they feel that they're getting better with the putting. So the possible question is kind of in there in the DNA, and you know, if we could just ask that one question, what does this ball have to do to go in the hole? Boom, an image forms. They're very clear on the entry point. The more concise the amount of questions, the better. Because
I think you can actually, rather than separate them or break them down into 1, 2, or 3 questions, so you're not putting a full stop and or a question mark after, is it possible the ball could go in the hole? You know, you could just kind of ask a sentence, if you like, a sentence of 3 questions. Is it possible the ball could go in the hole? Yes. Okay, that being the case, what does the ball need to do? It needs to travel on the right line at the right pace, which starts to form an image, which then kind of answers the third question of what does a really good putt look like anyway. So you can kind of, rather than break them down and put full stops or question marks after every question, you can just let them kind of continue into one phrase or a sentence, if you like, so that, and as Karl said, you know, the better you get at asking these questions initially, they start to become a little bit more automatic, so you don't actually have to think too much about asking the questions. But you do have to ask some kind of question, because that again is going to focus your attention. Because, you know, I always say to people, okay, what would be a really good way to get your attention? And they stand there and they think for a couple of seconds and they say, well, how about if I told you, I'm going to give you a clue, I've actually just done it. And say, well, you've just done what? Asked you a question. And while they're thinking about answering that question, they're not thinking about anything else. So yeah, again, it's a very personal thing. All we're saying is here are some really good questions. If asking 1 works for you, great. If asking 2 works for you, great. If asking 3 works for you, great. But we wouldn't suggest you make it any more kind of complex or complicated than that.
One thought on this though that would give you some clues. Whenever I'm working with anybody with putting, one of the first things I'm looking at is not so much the stroke, but is the behaviour of the eyes, because the person's eyes will give you a real clue as to what they're paying attention to. Now, there's a very, very broad generalisation, and it's a hugely broad generalisation, and I shouldn't do that, but I will. Generally, if you look at the behaviour of the eyes of poor putters, their eyes tend to be in the routine, and just before they hit the putt, their eyes tend to be far more here on what they're doing and the ball and the line and things like that. And as a generalisation, we find with better putters, their eyes tend to spend a little bit more time on tracking the line, the entry point into the hole, things like that. You know, I get a lot of my students to trying to not convince them, but backing up this, I'll say, tap into YouTube. Jack Nicklaus holding an important putt. You know, one of the greatest putters that's ever played the game, with a quirky looking stroke, which is strange more people haven't copied that because it was so effective. But have a look at Nicklaus's behaviour of his eyes. You know, if you see Jack set up and his eyes will very much track the line, and he seems to stare at the entry point.
He appears very unaware of what his putter's doing. What he's doing is just you can see his attention is very much on what he wants the ball to do. Yeah, that's very
but that is a very big clue for you when you're working with attention, is watch the behaviour of the eyes. And you know, if you see eyes that are fluttering around, you know, I know there's quiet eye research and things like this, but it really does give you a clue about where somebody's attention is. And again, then you can experiment that. You can play around with it and see what results you get.
just quickly on that, we had a question come through about what your thoughts were on eyesight influencing pace of putts. So visual skewing, left and right eye dominance, do you find that that has an impact on how people control the pace?
Yeah, it does. I think what has more of an influence is basically, again, if you think about it historically, most green reading, coaching, instruction, videos, magazine articles, whatever, are about reading a putt down the line. Now, we've seen it time and time again. You know, we've all been there ourselves. When you've hit a shot that's right down the flag, you think, oh yes, I can't wait to tap that, and it's dead. You think it's resting against the flag. But the closer you get, actually, the further the ball away is from the hole. So looking down the line kind of foreshortens everything. So I think that the easiest way, the quickest way to get better at pace is to look at any putt from the low, any and every putt from the low side, because you start to look at it in widescreen, in HD, and in 3D. You'll see all the changes in contour, changes in elevation. You'll get a much idea of the length of the putt. I mean, you wouldn't dream of hitting a shot from the middle of the fairway if you didn't know how far you had to the flag, to the front of the green or the flag. But if you ask yourself, when was the last time I hit a putt when I didn't actually know how far I had, it would probably be the last time you played. So unless you know how far you've got, how hard you know how to hit it. Now, left and right eye dominance is really important, and it can alter the way you, if you're right eye dominant, you're standing very square to it, your alignment's not going to be great for a start. If your alignment's not great, you're probably going to be aware of that, so you're going to start paying more attention to line than you are to pace. If we tend to find that just by paying attention to pace or being aware of pace, you can get better at it. You know, Karl said earlier on that most people are better at line than they think, but not as good at pace as they think they are. But that's largely because they're paying more attention to the line than they are to the pace. As soon as you get tuned into pace, all of a sudden you can get better at it. You know, one of the exercises we do is we'll throw them a golf ball and ask them to throw it back, and we'll move 6 feet to the right and 3 feet back and ask them to throw it back to us. And unerringly, they will find their target with the perfect line and perfect pace. Then we move a little bit closer and a little bit to the left and throw the ball back and forward to them, and just change direction, change distance all the time. And the brain and body just figure out how much force to apply and in which direction. So once you've got an idea of what the task is, if you're paying attention to your stroke or your shoulders or your whatever it is you're paying attention to and not paying attention to the ball, you probably won't be very good at pace anyway. But once you really get tuned into what the ball needs to do and start to read stuff on the low side, again on the website, there's a couple little snippets in there that might be quite helpful. But yeah, I mean, it's always, I had an interesting one the other day that a guy who was very right eye dominant tended to miss his putts short and right. So because he wasn't really seeing, because when he looked up, basically all he could see was the kind of right third of the hole. So his brain was kind of calculating that little sliver of hole that he saw, his brain was trying to get it in the middle of that. And if he missed it slightly to the right, he's missing the hole. So what we did, we actually got him to open up a la Jack Nicklaus, and all of a sudden his eyes were a bit more face on to the line, if you like. And that straightened up his alignment straight away. So yeah, it's quite important to figure out. I guess that was a very long way around to a short answer. Yeah, be aware of left and right eye dominance and try to find out if not many people know which eye is more dominant. I don't think. I think you'd be surprised at how few people do. I asked the question quite a lot, and they just kind of looked at me as if to say, I don't know, I'm not an optician, I'm an optometrist. But it's a good question, and yeah, one I would always ask my students if they are struggling in any way, shape, or form.
I think we didn't get a chance to cover it, but the green reading one, number 6, as Gary said, that low side read is a real scenario. It really is literally an eye opener. For us, that when you look at a putt from behind the ball, the way that your eyes sort of work downwards, it almost foreshortens the length of the putt.
It does very much.
And then when you stand from the side or on the low side, your eyes track this way on the horizon, and you can judge the length of the putt much better. So
yeah, you get a true read, if you like, true read of the length.
I think.
And again, if you don't know how far you're going, you don't know how hard you're going to hit, so how can you possibly choose a line if line is determined by the pace?
One radical drill that's worth trying and done with a number, especially with good players, is who are, again, obsessed with line, is get them to go on the green and it's a bunch of putts from different places, and we say to them they're not allowed to even read the putt. They've just got to walk up to it and try and get the pace right.
Yeah.
And it's an unbelievable drill, because the number of times that players actually, when they're not allowed to read it and they just focus on pace, actually something in the system seems to know what the line is, and the pace tunes in and all. Now, we're not saying don't read the line, but it's just an exercise. It's a great exercise to actually just free people up from the tyranny of perfection in terms of line.
Okay, just a few more questions. I've kept you long enough, but the questions keep piling in, which is great. So a couple of questions about markings on the ball and lines on the ball, and do you use a line on the ball to help someone line up? Obviously, you're focusing more on pace than line, so maybe that might be an issue. So if someone does use a line on the ball, do you take that away from them if they are good putters? And the second question in that similar area is, do you use a mark on the ball to help with the focus?
Yeah, I would suggest you use a dot rather than a line, because that can work on a number of things. If you think, if you put if you get your Sharpie and fill in a black dot on one of the dimples, then when we do the after image exercise, that really highlights that single point of focus attention, and it's really helpful for that. And you can also use a dot to help line up the middle of the putter or the middle of the golf ball. What we have found is, now some people like a line on the ball, but again, what it does subconsciously is it places your attention on line. And as Karl mentioned earlier, what we tend to see, if we've got a thin black line or a blue line or an orange line or pink line, whatever it is, subconsciously your brain will start to project an extension of that thin line from ball to hole. And again, just by subliminally having the line on your ball and your attention go onto line, it's taking it away at the expense of pace, if you like. So by you focusing on the line again at the expense of pace. But if you don't know how hard you're going to hit it, how do you know what line you're going to choose? You know, I think if anyone who's played in a 4-ball match where you're a bit unsure of a putt, and you get your partner over, your caddy over, and say, well, what's the line here? And he says, oh, it's a ball outside the right, and you've got it as 2. Who's right and who's wrong? You can both be right, because we're both seeing it at different paces. So yeah, I mean, if you putt with a line on your ball and you're shooting light side every time you play, I'm not going to be stupid enough or foolish enough, or neither of us are going to be foolish enough to tell you to stop doing that. However, if it's not working, and it didn't work last week, and it didn't work last month or last year, and it still hasn't worked, yeah, experiment without it. Put a little dot on top of the ball rather than a line, because then we're not, you know, we just find that everybody gets so tied down and tied up with line at the expense of pace.
I think the thing is, for a lot of players who do put a line on the ball, as Gary said, if somebody's a good putter, you wouldn't change anything, you keep them doing it. But for a lot of people, my experience with the line on there is that they get over the ball and immediately they doubt whether that line is set up correctly. It
doesn't always look like it did when you were looking down the line.
Like it did back here.
And that can be something as little as your head tilted one way, your neck bending a little bit too much this way or that way. All of a sudden that affects your eye line, so all of a sudden it doesn't match up with the line that you thought you saw when you were looking at it down the line. Once you're over it, I mean, I know when I've used the line in the past, I always thought the line pointed left of where I thought it did when I looked at it initially. And then I would try and, I guess, manipulate the putter head to counter that. Yeah, which wasn't very successful, so I stopped doing it fairly quickly. But that was my personal experience of it. We're never saying never do this or never do that, but experiment a little bit, mess around with it a little bit. You know, take the concepts, use them, explore them, and find out what works for you. It's all about finding. You know, the whole book was to help give people, golfers, some concepts, some ideas to run with, to explore with, to investigate, to kind of go down and personalize these concepts and ideas and make them work for them. It's all about finding your way, not as we don't say we've got the way. That'd be a bit naive, a bit arrogant.
Okay, we've got 3 more questions, then we'll let you go. Again, we appreciate your time tonight. So with the attention on the ball, do you
Yeah.
find that putter design makes any difference? So if someone's got a blade putter as opposed to a mallet style putter, do you find that that makes any difference?
It can do. I think one little exercise I've been doing quite a bit of late is I ask someone to imagine they're standing over a 2-foot putt with no ball, and then ask them to close their eyes, and then ask them to make a really bad stroke, or a 3 or 4-foot putt, and ask them to do a really bad stroke, and they find it really difficult because as soon as the putter starts to move a little bit one way, too much one way or the other, your brain really doesn't like it. It starts to self-correct. But yeah, it is really important to find out what style of putter, whether you need toe hang, you need center shafted, you need a mallet with the weights away from the face, so that you get a greater moment of inertia. And mallets tend to be a bit more straight back and straight through strokes. A toe hang, a Scotty or something like an old Ping Ans would be a bit more of a rotational stroke. So yeah, understand what kind of putter works for you, but ultimately once you've determined or once you've discovered what putter works for you, again, once you've got that figured out, then pay attention to the golf ball, because then your brain and body will know what to do with that particular type of putter in order to get the ball to behave in the manner you want it to.
Okay, so do you use PuttLab or Capto or something like that to store data on your clients when they're playing well? And do you have a thought on toe strike putters, like Tiger tends to hit off the toe a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, everyone's so different. The great thing about using SAM and TrackMan, these things, is we can measure patterns, we can measure what's going on. Now, the problem with some of the SAM stuff is we've got one here, and it's great, but it's very static, and it's a pretty flat green and pretty flat putt. I think what we tend to see is that strokes tend not to vary an awful lot. Like we used to think that if we hit one left, we hit one left, we hit one right, it's because the stroke was out, the swing was out. But it's actually more down to face angle than anything else, or failure, as you say, impact location. But again, sometimes we used to learn this as a kid, hit it a little bit out the toe if you're going downhill, to try and take a bit of the speed off it. So I think good players playing well will adapt, and the stroke won't always be the same, because the shot or the putt creates the stroke. So not every stroke will be the same. If you're trying to make your stroke the same every single time, the stroke required for a 2-foot putt isn't going to be the same as one for a 32-foot putt. So, trying to go away and work on your stroke exclusively without any kind of real thought for how that's going to affect the ball, and without any way of measuring what's going on with the ball, would seem a little bit kind of nonsensical to me.
I think a great theme for players that really changes everything is the idea, instead of consistency, as we said earlier on, adaptability, that give them the concept that could you begin to believe that in any given moment, if you're really clear on what the task is, that your system will in that moment organize the behavior to get that done. And is it going to be the same every time? It's going to be pretty close.
It's going to be similar, but it's not going to be the same.
But it just frees you up to sort of think because back to this dynamic systems theory, that everything is changing constantly. The environment's dynamic, you as a human being are dynamic, every single putt is totally different. And this idea of just uniform consistency, while it's incredibly appealing to the intellect, it is so restricted for a lot of players but then you change and think, could you have the capability to adapt in this moment to get the ball into the hole? And I think then, it just opens up a completely different direction in the man, and that becomes then all about the player rather than the coach always having to diagnose what's wrong.
Yeah, because there will be days when you just feel like your stroke's not there. It'll feel different today than it did last Thursday or next Sunday, whatever it is. So if it doesn't feel right, and you're kind of thinking, right, I've got to get my stroke right, even if you get your stroke what feels 100% right and you hit what you feel is 100% good putt, there's no guarantee the ball's going to go in anyway. So if you, as Karl just said there, if you can work on your adaptability and trust your system to get the job done, then you'd be surprised at how good your technique becomes based around the task. You know, as we said a couple of times earlier on, we believe and we've seen, this is not just an opinion, this is based on lots of data gathered and lots of putts we've seen hold, that the task, the more we allow the task to create the technique, you know, we allow the putt to create the stroke, the better results will be.
And one final question to finish off for tonight. So do you have any preference with regards to tempo or acceleration rates that appear to produce better speed control?
No personal preference. I tend not to like to kind of pigeonhole players. You know, Brent Snedeker would be, his tempo would be very different to others. That tempo percentage and tempo ratios are all, with good putters, all fairly similar anyway. But to be honest, I think the more we pay attention to that, we're getting away from paying attention to the golf ball. And again, when we with the testing we've done, when we ask people to pay attention to their tempo, listen, it's important. But if you think about, you know, guys who we grew up watching or whatever, guys like Nick Price had a very, very fast tempo. I mean, everything Nicky Price did was at 100 miles an hour. Then if you look at Ernie, his tempo, he does everything at 2 miles an hour, apart from drink beer, but he's pretty good at that. But they're very different characters, very different tempos, so they're going to have different tempos and tempo ratios. Tempo ratios might be similar, but their kind of overall tempo would be very different. But again, that's more of an observation of what happens when the player is performing a task, rather than the other way around, if that makes sense. So again, if we start to pay too much attention to the stroke and to the tempo and to all sorts of other things that are happening with the person and the stroke, we are doing that at the expense of what's going on with the golf ball. And just in our experience, when you pay more attention to the golf ball and what that has to do, some really good things start to happen.
I think what, from my experience with that, is that when the mind's pretty quiet, the appropriate tempo emerges. So if somebody's really clear on the process and what they need to do to program the computer, an appropriate tempo will emerge. The more we get involved in tempo, it'll be a little bit trying to change the tempo of the way that you speak, or the tempo of the way that you walk. And when you're conscious of it, you know, I think it can be beneficial to some players, but in the main, I would say for most people, it probably wouldn't be something I would get them to put their attention on. I think, as I say, tempo emerges as a result of other things.
Again, it's worth doing some experimentation, some exploration with, and if you've got some way of measuring what the results are, you will find out, as we mentioned or alluded to at the very, very start of the webinar, that you will find out that where your attention is useful for you or for the person you're working with. So again, you will soon discover whether having their attention there is useful or useless. Is it helping them perform the task to the best of their ability, or is it detrimental to that?
I think that would be a good way to sort of sum up everything we talked about, both as a coach and as a player. Become that attention detective. Start to unpick the personal formula. Where does that person need to have their attention to get the job done? And then it becomes a really interesting journey then, that's not just
fascinating, and it's fun.
It's not just jumping in about effects rather than causes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, guys. We certainly do appreciate you going well over time and answering all the questions that everyone sent through. So heaps of great information coming through. So a huge thank you from the PGA for spending time with us tonight.
Can I just mention a couple of resources, Brent? If people got any questions, it'd be great to say hello to us after today. There's 3 potential websites, and if you're interested in looking at a little bit more into what we do, so there's the Lost Art of Golf.com, and then you've got Gary's website, which is tpegs.com, tpegs.com. and then my own website is themindfactor.com. It'd be great to say if anybody's got any questions or anything that we can
give us a shout.
We can help them with. And if you connect with me, I'll keep you posted how well your Australian team is doing over here during the World Cup and the Ashes, so we can keep focused on that.
When you connect with me, we can gang up, and I'll let you gang up on Karl. You've got the Scottish contingent here.
No, that sounds perfect. So, and just a couple of plugs before we let everyone go for the Aussie guys on the call. We've got a Gravity Fit session coming up in Perth shortly. So if you're over there, feel free to sign up for that one. You'll find the details on My PGA. We have Peter Croker presenting next Wednesday for Webinar Wednesday. So sign up for that again via My PGA. And obviously we've got the PGA Expo coming up as well. So you need to book the spot for the 3 days up there, which will be an awesome 3 days with some really good presenters and some good information and some good product displays from the golf companies as well. So as usual, the feedback survey will pop up when we close the session. So if you take a few seconds to fill the feedback in, I would appreciate it. And I will send out the recording of this presentation tomorrow once I get it all tweaked up and put up online. So again, thank you so much for your time, guys. We really do appreciate it. And we'll speak to you all again soon. Have a great night.
Take care. Cheers, guys.